Hey guys, welcome to episode 98 of The Green Life. This week we carry on talking about women's reproductive health with an amazing guest, Dr. Nitu Bajekal. Dr. Bajekal is the author of Living PCOS Free as well as Finding Me in Menopause, the book we're going to mostly focus on today. As we dive into this wonderful subject, we're going to really discover how our plant-based diet can really support women, but also we're going to talk about all the myths and how we can control our changes in hormones so we don't have to live miserably. This is a very personal story to Dr. Bajekal, who went into menopause really early into her years, and as she learned, she can share what she learned so that we don't have to worry or suffer through the hormonal changes. Okay, before we get into this show, I just want to give a big shout out to Nama Well for the J2 juicer and the C2 juicer and blender, as well as Happy Legs, the pants that will allow you to go for your OBGYN checkups without feeling exposed or intimidated. We talked about that last week, so the link is in the show notes for you to get your pair at a discount code, as well as helping the show. And of course, other affiliate accounts such as Dr. Morse's Herbs, which I love, Wonder Workshop, and New Zest. You guys help the show when you purchase from my links, and I'm really, really grateful. With the Nama 2, actually, I don't have an affiliate account, but I have a discount code for you, and this is really a gift to kind of prompt you to having more plants into your diet. And we're going to talk about how to have more plants for our health and hormonal balance with Dr. Bajekal. So without further ado, let's get into this episode, welcoming our beautiful guest. Hello, Dr. Bajekal. Thank you so much for joining me on The Green Life today. How are you?
I am very, very good, actually. Just grateful for a whole bunch of things. So really happy to be here talking to you. And I hope what we discuss and what I have to say will help your audience.
I am sure it will. And I'm so grateful that our common friend, Kim Campbell, put us in touch, because she was telling me how wonderful you are. And I didn't even know about, this was when your PCOS book came out. So
Correct.
I have been following you since and really impressed. Also
Thank you.
because in the space of OBGYN doctors, a lot of the time when we talk about hormones, there is this understanding that we need to eat animal products to make us work well. And I am really glad to see that a doctor actually is looking at it in a different way. But before we get there, can I have a little bit of background about you? If people don't know you, haven't encountered you yet, like your story, because it's really fascinating. I was reading on your website.
Yeah.
So if you can just summarize a little bit.
I have a much more detailed story in my books, both the Living PCOS Free as well as the next book, Finding Me in Menopause, which is coming out on April 25th. But my story started in India. I was born to South Indian parents, born in West Bengal, which is Calcutta. And I actually grew up eating mostly plant-based because my parents were vegetarian. My mother was an ethical objector. I did eat meat occasionally, and my mother used to get upset. I used to say, oh, they're already dead. Didn't really pay much attention to it. Sorry, my dog's in the background. And I very quickly decided I wanted to become a doctor because my sister and brother were doctors. I didn't have any sudden enlightenment or anything. I was very much into sports. I was very sporty. But because they were doing that, and in India, often when you were good in studies, you ended up doing, medicine or law or engineering. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I just absolutely adore my profession. And very quickly, when I started in Pondicherry, which is one of the top institutes in India, deep in the south of India, little French-speaking area, I very quickly realized that OBGYN was my passion. And so I moved there. I met my husband there. We were in first year medical school at 18. So we've been together 44 years. And we moved to Delhi, and he trained to become a spinal surgeon, and I trained to do OBGYN. Still find it just as thrilling. We moved to the UK when I was about 29, 30, thinking that we'll just like to travel the world and then go back home. And of course, that never happened. 33 years later, we are still here. But no regrets. And during the course, I realized that I'd never been taught nutrition. I had just watched my parents eat really healthily, mostly whole food, plant-based foods. Oil and dairy were expensive. So you know, my mother used to be an amazing cook and a teacher and things. So, and she was always very conscious about the world and, didn't like plucked flowers and wanted us to stroke flowers and leaves, and everything is sentient in some ways. So that was always deep in me. And then what happened was I used to occasionally eat chicken, maybe, I don't know, once in a few months, when after I met my husband, without really thinking very much about it. If you've ever eaten in India, most meat is never served as meat. It's, disguised in a curry and things. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
really know what you're eating. So essentially, I went completely vegetarian when I was pregnant with my second daughter. This was about 32, 33 years ago, just when I'd reached the UK. But I didn't bring my children up as vegetarian for the first few years. They ate mostly vegetarian. They ate vegetarian, but not. I wasn't strict about it. And then when my younger daughter was about 9 or 10, she came home and said she wanted to go vegan, and I didn't know exactly what being vegan was, and so she explained to me, and then it was like a light bulb moment, and I switched. And so did my older daughter, who was 12, and then it took my husband another 18 years to give up. He'd given up meat, but to give up eggs and dairy and fish took him another 18 years. And he had to become diabetic and, put on a lot of weight and then realize the benefits of eating plant-based. So
Mm.
he's now like, so upset that I did not tell him about this. But, you can't win. So, but there was another situation that had occurred. I was, moving forward very well with my career. I was, a consultant. I'd become a consultant in OBGYN, which was really hard for an immigrant and a woman of color. But at 38, I became menopausal, which is known as premature ovarian insufficiency. I didn't really know. I thought initially I was being bullied. I thought it was stress,
Mm.
despite being a senior, you know, um, being a
Doctor.
doctor who'd had over 16, 18 years of training and very good training, I still didn't realize. So when I did, I was really struggling and I needed to go on hormone replacement therapy. But those days, the WHI study and all that sort of tried to make it sound like HRT was dangerous. And so
Mm.
even despite me requesting it, my GP did not want to prescribe it. And I wasn't confident enough to ask my male colleagues because I was the only female. So for me, luckily, a year down the line, when I was still struggling with symptoms, my daughter turned plant-based and vegan. So many of my symptoms, improved hugely, except possibly sleep because of the fact that I have a very busy
Hormones.
job. Yeah, and the hormones. So as a result, I started eating that way, but it still took me another 10 years to realize, because being scientific, I had never heard that nutrition could play a big role in, uh, healing oneself. So, or lifestyle, any form of lifestyle. You just knew, okay, you ate well and things like that. And I was always slim and very sporty and things like that. So I didn't really spend much time thinking about it. And when I discovered all the science, then I went on to do become board certified lifestyle medicine physician. And I wanted to bring all this information to my patients because every aspect of human health, especially women's health and hormonal health, can be hugely impacted with what you put in your mouth or what you don't put in your mouth, how you move, how you sleep, how you stress, and what the community that you have around you. And also, so the beauty of the way I practice is that I'm a surgeon, and at the end of the day, lifestyle medicine goes hand in hand with Western medicine. It's not one or the other. And yes, if you're lucky enough and you don't need any medication, that's great. But if you are somebody who has a diagnosis of PCOS or endometriosis, or you're suffering really badly from menopausal symptoms and you're doing everything that you can, or you've got cancer or large fibroids, you probably will need surgery or medications. But that doesn't mean that lifestyle should be thrown out of the window, because
Mm.
that can make the amount of medications that you need much less. It might even help you avoid certain medications and surgery. but it also helps you to optimize your health. So that's where I'm at now. I've retired from the NHS in the UK when I turned 62 years ago, and I'm focusing more on trying to educate people through social media, write my books. But I also do some private practice where I see a restricted number of patients so that I can do all the stuff that I want to do, still working 70, 80-hour weeks.
Yeah.
I
Amazing.
love
Thank you
what I
so
do, so it
much.
doesn't feel like work.
Well, exactly. I can
Yes.
relate to that. I'm,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. First of all, Pondicherry is a beautiful place. I think it's one
Yes.
of the gems of India. And
Totally.
I lived in Mauritius. So I
Did
was
you?
actually exposed to the Indian culture since I was
Correct.
quite young. And
Correct.
it's true that as you said, a lot of the animal products, if they are used, they are in curries, and you don't actually see them, so you don't
Yeah.
really realize that they're there.
Correct.
But
Correct.
it's so easy to actually be on a plant-based diet with Indian food. In fact, on my trip to the Golden Triangle a few years ago in 2014, I just had the best plant-based food there. I
Yes.
didn't
Yes.
even have to struggle.
No.
So it was such a
It
beautiful,
can be a bit difficult in India because of the ghee and
yeah,
dairy. So you have to be quite clear because people don't have an
yeah,
understanding. But South Indian food especially is very conducive to being completely vegan or
vegan, yeah,
plant-based. Yes. So,
yeah.
and there are so many foods. Most foods can be made plant-based very easily, except for a couple of
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally had a good experience as long as you
Yeah.
said, as long as you explain that you
Yeah.
don't want any dairy, you're fine.
Yeah. I mean, I struggled. I just came back from Japan. I struggled a little bit on the outside if you just went random, if you didn't prepare. But
Mm,
actually, the foods are so conducive to eating vegan because they have such a strong Buddhist culture.
yeah.
So, really, there are so many cuisines all around the world that, we have a wonderful French chef. I don't know if you know about Gautier, who's,
We, yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, every cuisine can be made delicious and plant-based and kind and reducing human and animal suffering. Because it's not just the animals that suffer, humans suffer where you have, a lot of pesticides being used
yeah.
and, things like that. So,
Ah,
yeah.
completely. Completely agree. Yeah, Gautier actually was on PCRM has created this program called One Healthy World, and we had the
Yes.
French chapters. And because I speak French, I was on the same episode with
Oh,
Gautier.
fabulous.
So
Yes.
this is how I got to know him. And then I just saw that
Yeah.
he's basically making this haute cuisine in London, in Soho.
Totally.
And French cuisine is not known for being vegan, but he's such a
No,
spokesperson for
no,
that, and it's brilliant.
no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Beautiful. So I think there were so many nuggets in your introduction that I'd like to piggyback on. But let's just start from obviously your newest book. It's about menopause, but I'd like to go back a little bit from
Yes.
a perspective of what menopause is, from the perspective of us actually starting our cycle, which happens
Correct.
in our teenage years when our hormones start kicking in.
Yeah.
So a lot of women, young girls are actually not aware of how
Correct.
even the cycle works, and so they are just
Correct.
found themselves, okay, I bleed once a month. They don't understand that there's a shift in hormones throughout the month. Our cycle is so important and so different to a 24
Yeah.
hours men's cycle. So I'd like for you to actually go into the details of what the cycle is and when we start and how we should look at it, and then we can just move
Definitely.
forward.
Definitely. I mean, so there are books written on the menstrual cycle as such. So,
Yeah, no.
I'll try and condense it. But generally, the start of the period is known as menarche, which means when you start your period. And the range tends to be between 8 years and 16 years. But by 15, if you haven't started a period or your child hasn't started a period, then it's very important that you seek medical advice because there may be certain conditions that are stopping periods from happening. And usually a couple of years before, so between 8 and 15. So say, there may be signs of puberty. So usually the average age tends to be 12, 13, but it could be younger or older. But a couple of years before that, there would be signs of, breast buds and axillary and pubic hair and things. So it's important to be aware of these things,
Yeah,
changes, and sometimes mood changes may be there even before the periods have started and things like that. But there are many conditions that, where periods may not occur. And so that is why you should not be leaving that and waiting till 18, 19, because there could be eating disorders or, premature ovarian insufficiency, There could be other medical conditions as well. So I do discuss all that in my book, in Living PCOS Free. I have a whole chapter
Yeah.
on the menstrual cycle, and I think I have a chapter in Finding Mean Menopause, not a chapter, but enough information to tell you what the cycle is like. But what happens is there's a master switch in the hypothalamus, little tiny area in your brain that gets switched on, and puberty starts. And then when that happens, it starts talking to the ovaries through a complex set of hormones and messengers. Hormones are just chemical messengers. I don't like the word hormonal imbalance because really our body is very good at keeping things in balance. But what happens is that you have this switch that is switched on, and it works on the pituitary gland, which is another little gland in the brain that starts producing these luteinizing releasing hormones, LHRH, and basically gonadotrophin releasing hormones, which are released by the hypothalamus. They work on the pituitary gland to release particular hormones called follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These are all big words, but basically what they are is very simple. They are stimulating the follicle, or the little dot that is holding the egg. You're already born with the number of eggs. You cannot increase your eggs by anything at all. You can worsen the quality of your eggs by smoking and a poor diet and all, but you cannot actually change the number of eggs that you have. And so that is set with your genetics and with your own body. And so when those eggs fall to a critical level below 1,000, menopause sets in. And that usually occurs anywhere between 45 and 55, with 51 being the average age. So 8 to 15, and then 45 to 55. And in between is a reproductive age group. So when these hormones are woken up by the hypothalamus, which then sends hormones to the pituitary gland, which then sends hormones to your ovaries. So hormones are chemical messengers that have their magic on organs that are very distant. They don't necessarily work on the immediate organs. So they'll be produced by the pituitary gland and work on your thyroid, work on your ovaries, work on the testes, work on the adrenal glands. So when the ovaries, you're born with ovaries, there are about 1 million eggs that you're born with. In fact, there are more at the time of 20 weeks of gestation, and then they just die away naturally. And then those million eggs start depleting very rapidly, so that by the time you're 30, you have a few 100,000, and by the time you're 40, you have, a third of that, 3% of that that you're born with. So you can imagine that after 35, fertility and things do tend to deplete because the number of eggs deplete. But every month, the hormones released by the pituitary gland will work on a group of follicles containing immature eggs within an ovary. The two ovaries are egg baskets. And I would ask people to again refer to my book to see the anatomy, or go to my website, which is completely free, and they can read a little bit about what the uterus is, what the cervix is, what the fallopian tubes are, what are the ovaries. Ovaries are the egg baskets. And so these FSH and hormones and LH hormones will start working on these follicles and will select a group of immature follicles. They're not yet ready. And one of them will be crowned queen follicle. And so it will be fed in such a way that it reaches to the surface. And during that time, the follicle stimulating hormone is increasing. The estrogen levels are slowly increasing, so much so that, and without testosterone and progesterone, you can't have estrogen. So it's again a complex cycle in the ovary itself. So then this egg gets released because of the trigger from the luteinizing hormone produced by the pituitary gland saying, come on, release that egg. And that is done so that there's a plan for pregnancy. And when the pregnancy doesn't occur, so what happens is the egg gets released, progesterone levels start rising. And that's when women or people who menstruate may find that they are starting to have excess sleepiness or tiredness or mood changes and all that. And the body is getting ready for a pregnancy. The lining of the womb is thickening up. So the follicular phase is as it's increasing, and then you have the luteal phase. And so that luteal phase is when the egg has been released and the lining is thickening up and is getting ready for that ovary and for the ovum and the sperm to have met and fertilized and for it to embed. When in about 2 weeks' time that doesn't happen, so 28 days from the time you started your first cycle, then when that doesn't happen, you start menstruating, and that is the period. So you have this cycle that happens over and over again, but in the first few months of your starting a period, it may be a bit hit and miss, and it may be a bit hit and miss for a year or two before. That's why fertility is low after 40 generally, but it doesn't mean you can't get pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's important to know that, but it can be very hard. And when this pregnancy doesn't occur and then the lining sheds, that's known as a period, and that should not last more than 7 days. It should also not be very heavy. You shouldn't have clots larger than the size of your thumbnail. You shouldn't be having pain that stops the quality of your life. So periods should come anywhere between 24 and 35 days, but they should not be hopping 1 month 24, 1 month 35. And if you're missing periods, or they're 40 days, 42 days, 3 months, you have to seek help, because that may suggest that of many conditions, but one of the most common conditions is polycystic ovary syndrome. So it is so important to know what your natural cycle is. Is it between 24 and 35 days? Are you missing periods because it may be having lots of other medical conditions, including hypothalamic amenorrhea or eating disorders? Is it very heavy? So is it lasting more than 7 days? Are you needing to change very often? Are you having pain that affects the quality of your life? All these should not be ignored, because conditions like endometriosis often go misdiagnosed, polycystic ovary syndrome, fibroids. And you don't have to wait to try and get pregnant. Not everybody wants to get pregnant, but you want to make sure that your health is optimal so you can reach your career potential, your life potential. So important. So I hope I've tried to explain a little bit about the cycle, but it's nice to have a pictorial diagram and go into my book or onto my website. It's easy to find. I'm sure you'll put it in show notes.
I will do. And thank you for that. Again, the way that you explain it really just also highlights how the way that we've been talking about our cycle has been so demeaning sometimes, that
Correct.
those symptoms you say are not normal and we need to be aware of have been normalized. Like, oh, but you're normal
Yes.
to have
But
pain.
women's
It's
pain
normal.
has always been normalized, and that
Yeah.
is the sad thing. Can you
Yes.
imagine men having to go through labor?
Oh boy.
No. Okay, yes. And can you, so what happens is period pain, and especially because it can be quite subjective for some women who really don't
Yeah.
have much pain, it has been normalized because they've been told to normalize it. Even if it was very bad for them, they've
Yeah.
been telling their children to suck it up, and doctors as well. So it is quite a complex thing. But also it's important to remember that periods are a vital sign. We don't teach our medical students that. So if you think about it, whenever a patient comes into the hospital, we check their blood pressure, their temperature, their pulse rate, their breathing. Those are the four vital signs. Period should be a fifth vital sign, according to the group of pediatricians as well as the American College of Obs and Gynae. Why? Because if you're not having your periods, and say you come in with a broken leg, that might be from being anorexic and or having an eating disorder that has caused bone thinning. It could be that if you're not having periods, you could be pregnant, you could be having early menopause, you could be having so many symptoms and signs that should lead you down another path as well after sorting out the immediate problem. But if you don't ask the period history, then how, and you'd be amazed how many people do not ask that. And also I want your listeners to remember, from the minute you start your period until you completely finish, you must be tracking your cycle. You have to note down, whether in a diary or on an app that is free, when your period starts, when it finishes, was it, what was the experience. Those things are important, so that when you go to your doctor to try and highlight things, you don't have the time to then start thinking what is your cycle like. You have everything there, all your notes should be there, so that you go in for an appointment, ask the questions, get your answers, rather than spending time thinking about your medical history or your surgical history or your menstrual cycle, so that you're not wasting time, because doctors often will finish with you in 5-10 minutes and send you on
Yeah.
your way, and you'll be none the wiser. So you have to be prepared. You have to be your own advocate.
Absolutely, I agree with that. In fact, yesterday I interviewed Dr. Ben Snowden, who's a new OBGYN actually, and it
Uh-huh.
was nice to talk to a man
Of
that is really
course.
passionate about women's health, because he was also saying, we talked about the importance of going for our periodical checks, cervical
Correct.
screenings.
Correct.
He's the co-founder of a company called Happy Legs, which is they make trousers for women that feel very anxious about going for these kind of checkups,
Correct.
and the pants are made to make you feel more in control, more covered
Correct.
up, and one of the things that we were saying is how important it is to know our cycle also, because it is quite important to know when to go for these
Correct. And
screenings,
what is normal and what isn't? Because
Mm,
women will often tell me that they had been bleeding for a month and then they went to seek help. No, that's not
yeah,
normal. If you're bleeding more than 7 days, if you're having bleeding after intercourse
yeah,
or after vaginal penetration with anything, if you have not kept up with your pap smear test, if you are having a bleeding in between your periods, none of that is normal. So I
mm,
discuss a lot of that on my free website, so people can just log on and read and then seek help, especially about cervical screening and about human papilloma virus and why it is so important, because it's a preventable cancer.
yeah,
We can save lives. So it's so
absolutely.
important with vaccinations and with early screening. It is so, so important to follow what the guidelines say.
Yeah, absolutely. We are so lucky to have the diagnostics that we have nowadays. So
Yeah,
we definitely have to take
absolutely.
advantage. So
Totally.
beautifully explained, beautifully put forward. And obviously now we're getting towards, we have a life of cycles that a lot of people
Yeah,
don't appreciate. Since I started learning about the period, I completely respect my body so much more. And I really
correct.
am actually so happy that I have a balanced period that is very punctual, that I appreciate it when it comes. It's like a
Correct.
detoxification for the body as well. And I I value it because I know at some point it will go away. And a lot of my clients, as well as probably a lot of people that will be reading your book. And by the way, I absolutely love the title because finding me in menopause, we do feel lost when we start our
Yes. I
perimenopausal
was
and
lost,
menopausal
which is
years.
why my friends told me, they're my sort of age, 60, 62, but we were never lost. I said, the book is not it's my wish. I was lost. And
Yeah.
that's what I want to say, because I was lost and I had to find myself. And I'm so happy, because I don't know if I would have gone down this path had I not had lost my period at 38 years of age.
Mm, yeah.
So one has to be grateful for many things. I was very fortunate. I already had my children because I did want a family. Many
Mm,
people can't have that, chance or choice when they have premature insufficiency, at the age of 12 or 15 or 20, because it does occur in 1 in 10,000 people under the age of 20. So,
yeah.
and I do have patients. So, yes, thank you. I knew as soon, and I thought, oh my God, I hope there's no other book called Finding Me in Menopause, because that is my book, is calling out my name.
Totally. And it's a perfect title. So,
Thank you.
if we can talk about this perimenopausal stage, which is
Yeah,
obviously the precursor to going into
correct.
menopause, and I think a lot of women feel lost when one because there wasn't any information up to a couple of
Correct.
years ago. Now we started talking about it more, but still people are like, oh, I have a normal period, and all of a sudden it's just not like it used to be,
Correct.
and people start putting on weight and they don't understand why. They had the same diet as before, they didn't change anything. There are things shifting and changing. How do
Correct.
we navigate this very, very important transitional period of our life?
Yes. I think the earlier you get informed about the menstrual cycle and the different phases of the reproductive stage, it's really helpful, because if you don't know, you get scared. Okay, the unknown is always scary. You don't go for your checkups. You will hide your head in sand, or you will try and tell yourself it's normal you're coping. And women have this habit of trying to cope and putting themselves last. Okay, all of us have done it. So I think it's important to understand that perimenopause is what it means. Peri means around menopause. Okay. Menopause is a retrospective diagnosis, which means that you finally stop your periods after 12 months of no period. You're not going to know that until 12 months are over, and you never finish with menopause. After your periods have halted, for the rest of your life, you're going to be post menopause. But the time around menopause, when your periods stop, so a few years before and up to 1 year of it stopping, is known as perimenopause or menopause in transition. The time usually before you completely stop your periods. Okay. So that is important to understand. And that can be anywhere between 2 to 8 years up to 10 years. So if you're destined to stop your periods at 45, your perimenopause could start at 43, but it also could start at 37.
Mm,
And that may have a huge implication if you're trying to think of building a family, for example, because the reason why you're going into perimenopause is because the number of eggs are dropping in number. So that is why these discussions have to happen. One has to know about these things. And rather than leaving it to chance or leaving it to many ill-informed doctors and health professionals who will give you wrong information. So it's really important to educate yourself and then decide what you want to do with that information. You don't have to take every information on board. So 2 to 8 years before your periods stop. So the average age of a menopause is 51. So generally about 4 years before, so 47 tends to be the average age when women will start noticing, or anybody who menstruates will start noticing they may have some perimenopausal symptoms, but not everybody. Okay, so that's important to remember. Whether it's menopause or perimenopause, there will be a whole group of women who virtually have very little symptoms and are very happy to coast through it. But some will have as short as 2 years, others will have nothing at all, and some will go on for 8, 10 years. And what are those symptoms? It could be all the symptoms that you see in menopause, whether it is hot flashes, low mood, lower libido, anxiety, depression, poor sleep, putting on weight, a host of those 34, 35, 60 symptoms that may be there, you can experience in perimenopause, but often cyclically. Okay, which means that you may be still having regular periods, or you may start usually hopping and skipping periods. So you'll have a period in January, then nothing maybe in February, then you'll have March, April, May, then you will have nothing for 3 4 months, and you say, oh my god, I'm having all these hot flushes, I'm not able to sleep. And I'm so sorry, I don't know who my dogs are barking at, but
It's
I don't
okay.
want to go. um, so they may be thinking, what's going wrong with me? And actually, then the periods come back to being normal, and they think, oh my God, did I imagine that? Maybe that
Mhm.
was all in my head. And so the cycle continues. And it's important to know that all those symptoms are very valid. There are no blood tests that you can do, zero blood tests that will tell you whether you're in perimenopause. But you should check out whether you're anemic. So you should have a full blood count, your iron stores, your thyroid function. These are times to do those sort of tests, maybe get your cholesterol levels checked, check your blood sugar to make sure that all your basic blood tests are fine. Are you up to date with your screening tests? Make sure those things are fine. But there are no hormonal blood tests, urine, saliva, or blood that will give you any information. So, what is important for you to do is to chart out your symptoms and see whether you need help. Is it self help or is it help from the help of a doctor? Also, another thing that can happen in perimenopause is that periods can start getting more close together. So instead of having a 30-day or a 28-day cycle, you may start noticing your periods are coming every 24 days,
Mm.
every 23 days. The frequency, the luteal phase is reducing. The other thing that one may notice, the periods are getting a bit heavier. Now, these are not to be taken as normal, because if the periods are getting heavy and it's affecting the quality of your life, you may have background conditions that are now raising their head: endometriosis, adenomyosis, a fibroid in the cavity. So it's important that you seek help in those situations for anything that persists more than 2 or 3 months, or if you're worried, you should not ignore it. But the usual story in perimenopause is that 2 to 3 to 4 years before, you will start noticing periods are hopping and skipping. And that is the normal. Most women will have that. But 1 in 10 women will tend to notice, at least I notice in my clinical practice, 1 to 2 women in 10 will start having heavy periods and quite troublesome symptoms. So really, which needs help. You don't have to wait for your periods to stop to start making changes for menopause, whether it's diet and lifestyle. Certainly that should start in your as early as when you're in the uterus. But,
Yeah.
throughout life, one has to be doing it. But as soon as you find out, you should bring those changes. But there are people who will need hormone replacement, even before their periods have stopped. And it's absolutely safe, if there are no contraindications, to see a specialist and do a trial and see. And if the trial, and you think, you know what, I'm no better, this is not for me right now, that's absolutely fine too. And then for others, they don't even need that, because they started bringing in the strength training, the mindfulness, the eating whole food plant-based, and they may eating lots of soy and tofu and edamame beans and miso and natto. So they know that, and lignans, like flax seeds and chia seeds and green leafy vegetables, they may find themselves fine. But you might be doing all that and still having lots of symptoms. And so, yes, you may need cognitive behavior therapy, you may need hypnosis, you may need acupuncture, You may need antidepressants. You may need hormone replacement therapy. So it's so important to have a big picture. It's not one or the other. I feel sad when I see people who are only about wellness, saying that all medication is bad. And when I see doctors and allopathic doctors who will say there's no truth in lifestyle and a holistic approach, because then we are doing a real disservice to the people who we are talking to, because you can actually use both modules so that you can actually have the best life that you are destined for.
Yeah, marrying the two is very important.
Yeah.
You mentioned something about antidepressant. I'd like to actually highlight this because a lot of there is an emotional and mental component with going through these changes. And I
Correct.
wonder if you feel that, and a lot of doctors are like, "Oh, just go on antidepressant." They actually
No.
don't even
Yeah.
have the choice, don't give
Correct.
the choice for HRT. Do you feel like women should first experiment with balancing their hormones and lifestyle, whether it's with lifestyle
Oh
and diet,
yes.
and then
Oh yes.
HRT, and see if that helps before they even consider things like
It's a very
antidepressant?
individual diagnosis. A good doctor has to take a very thorough history. There will be some women who will need antidepressants. Whether they need HRT or lifestyle changes, that's a separate matter. They will
Yeah.
need that and they can wean themselves off. The vast majority don't need antidepressants. The
Yeah.
vast majority need, a good detailed history and examination from an empathetic health professional. That is half the battle gone. Then, dietary and lifestyle changes. Cognitive behavior therapy can also make it's in fact been proven to help even more than antidepressants. But
Yeah.
there will always be a small group of women who will benefit hugely from those drugs. Should we be giving them first line? No, like a lot of doctors do. No, but that comes from a place of ignorance, you
Mm,
see, and a place of laziness a little bit. I know
mm.
that we are busy as doctors, but actually, if you take time with your patient the first time, they won't keep returning back to you as well. You will
Yeah.
be able to do things properly. And so you free up more time to see other person rather than rushing the diagnosis. They feel unhappy, then they go away. They never either come back to see you or they never see any health professional. And you've done them a disservice. You've gaslighted them by saying your pain is not real or your symptoms are not real or your periods are happening. So you definitely cannot be depressed or you definitely cannot be going through menopause. We don't want those. We want somebody to explain things properly. And if I truly feel that what the person is thinking they have, so somebody say they come and they say, I definitely have polycystic ovary syndrome. My job is to explain everything to them and explain to them why I don't think that diagnosis is right.
Hmm.
Because yes, they may think that that is the right diagnosis, but with my 40 years experience, my job is to help the person because they may not have that condition, but they may very well have another condition. So it is so important that you actually listen to the person and then with authority and kindness explain why you are thinking your thought process. Because when doctors don't explain, you start think that they're hiding something,
Mm.
and then you go and look for another person for a second opinion, or you go to somebody who's not really qualified, and it's a very sad situation, and you may end up spending hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of your expensive dollars, pounds, whatever currency you
Yeah.
have. So that's important. And also supplements, you don't want to take too many supplements
Yeah.
because supplements also can have side effects. So you want to make sure that the ones that you're taking are actually benefiting you and not costing your wallet a huge amount of money.
Agreed. You actually made a very good point. The doctor should take the time to get a
Yes.
history, and obviously you have worked in NHS, so you know how limited the time can be. Now you have the luxury of working in your private practice, and you can take that time. I personally see my clients the first time
Yeah.
for 2 hours, 2 hours and a half to go through
Yeah.
the whole health
Yeah.
history, and our follow up sessions are always over an hour. But this is not easily done in a system
No,
like
it's
the
not easily
NHS.
done. It's not easily done, but I would argue that I was on the NHS for 33 years
Mm,
and I would never see my NHS patients privately. I would be very insulted if they ever came to, because I would give them the same amount of time that I give my private patients. I did never
yeah.
distinguish because I think if you do a job properly the first time, you will sort yourself out.
Yeah.
And that, I see many good doctors who do that. But yes, there are many doctors who feel rushed. Yes, there is a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
and to see people in 10 minutes and all that. But you've got to work out a system where, the patient, and that's why I want to educate patients to advocate for themselves. But I also want health professionals to take the time to listen to people, because,
Mm.
out of every 10 patients you see, 7 patients will be pretty straightforward and you can sort them out very quickly.
Yeah.
But for the other 2 or 3 are complex and you have to give them the time, and you have to bring them back. I think if one does that, I hear what the constraints of the NHS and all are. I was part of that. But I can tell you, I know many a good doctor, and I know of myself, we did not rush our patients and we would see them and we had very, very good rapport with our patients. So it is possible. And I do think it boils down to how you want to run your practice.
Mm.
Yes, if you don't have the means or if you don't have the experience, and I think that's a big problem nowadays with all the shift system that doctors are working and things. They don't get the feel with the patient and they see them and then they never see them again. They
Yeah.
never see the whole story, unfolding, which is why I see there is a huge role for, wellness practitioners, because, you do take the time to see the person for a long time. And as long as you're empowered and educated to know that, right, this is beyond mine, I do need a specialist input and we can work together. That is the most happy situation, because yes, I don't have 2 hours to talk to a person, but I'd be very happy to work with somebody who can do that. And I can provide the other input into helping them, get the right advice. Do they need surgery? Do they need medications? Or actually, is this something they can deal with themselves? And I think that's the message I want to get out to all your listeners, is this is
Yeah.
not one or the other, and they should persist. Don't just take one person's answer and say, oh, they've said there's nothing wrong with me, unless you actually trust them completely and you're convinced that they are taking the time to explain to you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I lived in the UK for 13 years before moving to Portugal. Um, and I had a very good experience with the NHS, but
Yeah.
I was also educated. When I was going to my doctor, I had all my
Yes.
charts and I said, okay, this is what's happening. For
Yeah.
example, you said if you bleed between periods is
Yeah.
not normal. I had that happening, and
Correct.
my GP, she looked in and she said, okay,
Yeah.
it looks like you have polyps. When I
Yeah.
went to the referral OBGYN
Correct.
privately, he was very impressed with my doctor. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
she actually checked you. I'm like, yeah, because I told her exactly what I was
Yeah.
experiencing, and
Correct.
it made the process painless, quick, and and of course I want to save time for my doctor, for me, money, of course, because it's still a social system that we are benefiting from. And
Totally.
I felt very lucky. So I
Yeah.
know some women don't have a good experience, and it's sad.
No.
But at the
And
same
also
time,
there can be, socioeconomic factors
yes,
as well as language barriers. And also, as I said to you, pain and other things can
yeah,
be minimized for women. So we have to encourage, minority groups, LGBTQ plus people, women, all of them who are from these minority situations, to speak up for themselves. Because we do know that if you are then a woman of color, the likelihood is that you will have even less chance of being
yes,
heard. If you are somebody in a larger body, you have no chance. You will be told go away and diet. And that's not the only answer. Yes, of course, losing weight is important when you are carrying a lot of weight for medical reasons, but how you approach it, because a lot of people with PCOS will also have a binge eating disorder
yeah,
without purging. And so if you tell somebody to lose weight, all it will do is trigger them, rather than and giving them restrictive diets. Even a restricted plant-based diet is not good for people who have eating disorders.
mm,
So you do have to learn how to work with the individual, and that's why I want people to take. So that's the beauty about lifestyle medicine, is that you as the patient are the driver. Your self management and self care is key, and don't just take for granted something that somebody tells you. So it's so important to look at the science, the evidence. So always look at, bona fide sites, go to the NHS or Mayo Clinic or the Harvard School of Public Health or Cancer Research UK, or go to my website. You want to have people who speak with the references and scientific studies.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't sound right for you, it won't be that. Oh, sorry, I don't think my husband knows. He's probably come in.
No, it's
He
fine.
doesn't know I'm on a podcast, but I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. No, no, nothing came through. It's perfect. And
Okay.
it's you know what? I love podcasts like this too because they're organic and you are a human being living a normal life. So
Very
it's
much so.
completely fine.
Very much so. Two naughty rescue dogs who are 8 years old and who are always, looking to tell the postman off.
I hear you. I have I actually we came here with one that we got in London and then we now have six because we just
Oh,
rescued so many.
fabulous. I can,
Yeah.
my brother used to have 6 dogs. It's
Yeah.
fabulous. My two
So
are hard work.
yeah, yeah, no, they are sometimes. Um, so thank you for that, and thank you for opening the discussion about this and really empowering, women to talk about it, especially from minorities. I think that's important.
Thank you.
The next stage, obviously, after perimenopause is the menopause, which you explained. And a lot of women that enter menopause and stay there, they almost have this feeling of it's over. And I feel like menopause is actually the beginning of something even
Beginning.
better. Can we
Correct.
just dive into that? I know you put in your book, and
Yes.
that's a beautiful chapter to like actually look at menopause as the beginning of something really
Yeah.
expansive for
Yeah.
yourself.
And definitely, it depends upon your experience. I don't want to minimize somebody's traumatic
Yeah.
experiences and also when you've gone through it. But you can use that as an opportunity to think, what can I do to optimize my life, my health, and things like that. So menopause should not be the beginning of the end.
Mm.
And one has to remember that, yes, looking after yourself should not be a full stop at that stage because it should continue, if not more, because suddenly you are, especially if you're somebody in the average age group and you're not somebody who's stopped your periods under the age of 40. After that, the likelihood is that you have more time for yourself. You may be considering retirement. You might be considering, changing careers. You might, find these different things, also being free from period pain and things, maybe things that you have actually looked forward to. And in many societies, women may actually get more respect once they're considered more senior and things like that. So this is not necessarily everybody's experience. Everybody's experience is unique, but you need to find somehow some way of turning what can be a potentially negative experience into a positive experience because nobody else is going to do that for you. So
Yeah.
you've got to find a way of, trying to make the best of what you have and then deciding for yourself, am I doing the things that I can do within my capability with regards to diet? Am I eating enough beans and peas and lentils? And am I eating 2 to 3 portions of soya every day? Am I, do I need hormone replacement therapy? Do I need to actually make more friends? Do I need to build my community? Do I need to get rid of some friends who are toxic and who are dragging me down? Do I need to be doing more charity work, more community work? Can I have a purpose in life? Maybe I should, go to the soup kitchen. Maybe I should take my elderly neighbor for a walk. It doesn't matter what you do. You need to find a purpose. You need to find yourself a way where you identify your stress triggers. All of us have stress. So you need to find a way, okay, this stresses me out. So, but if I do this, it helps me. And it might be going for a short walk, or it might be doing some breath work, or it might be listening to your favorite song, or maybe doing a little dance in your room, or it might be just sitting in your car for 5 minutes before you come out to children. Because it can be a difficult time. Your parents are getting older, your children are leaving. If you have children, your children may
Yeah.
be leaving for university. You may be having lower libido, your partner may not really understand that, you may be having marital issues. So many things can happen, but you have to ground yourself because you are important. And if you don't make yourself important, everything around you will become so hard and you have to reach out for help. Don't expect people to understand that. That's the mistake I made. When I
Mm.
was feeling down or anxious, despite having a wonderful partner, I was not able to share because I should have shared, with my colleagues, with my friends, what was going through because, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's everything to be gained. And it took me a few years to start sharing that information. But I lost out of the time and I really needed them because, how will somebody know to help you if you don't tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
And the other thing I want to mention with menopause is that, there are certain things that can we have to be watching out for things like muscle wasting and osteoporosis and heart disease and putting on more weight. So those are things that are really key to address with strength training, going for, group classes or doing YouTube exercises, making sure that you're trying to bring more color onto your plate and eating more plant foods, even if you're not fully vegan or plant-based or whatever. It's so important to make these little changes as you want to make them
Yeah.
rather than being prescriptive. I have to do 100% of what Dr. Bajekal says. No. You have to do as 100% of what you want to do,
Yeah.
how much you want to do, rather than somebody else telling you, because nobody's watching
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to watch yourself. And
Yeah.
you made a good point. I was going to ask about exercise is something really big. A lot of women give up exercising, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm too tired. I don't want to get hurt. And actually, you do get hurt. You get more tired if you're not working out. So strength
Correct.
training, definitely important.
And hip
Um,
fractures are
and the
such,
fractures.
1 in 3 women will actually die from a hip
Yes.
fracture. And dementia is the biggest killer for us in women in the UK and is catching up in all other countries. 15% of all deaths are linked to Alzheimer's. And, so you don't want to be, the average life expectancy, for example, in the UK is 83 years. I'm sure it's in the rest of Europe as well. In Hong Kong, in Singapore, it's 88, Japan. But you do not want to be spending the last 15, 20 years of your life not recognizing your loved ones.
No.
So, and we know that when you eat brightly colored fruits and green leafy vegetables and lots of vegetables and potatoes and sweet potatoes and herbs and spices and turmeric and, having, cumin and all these cinnamon and all these beautiful spices in your diet and mushrooms and nuts and seeds, you will lower your risk of dementia, whether you like it
Yeah.
or people say, oh, it doesn't matter what you eat. It does matter what you eat. It does matter whether you get natural light. It does matter when you walk, out in the open. It does matter when you socialize with people. Loneliness actually is as bad as smoking. So really, these are things that as soon as we are aware of it, we should start bringing it into our lives. I am somebody, although I'm on so many podcasts and I do so many lectures, I'm quite an introvert in many ways, even though I'm very friendly, maybe because I like my patient, I love my patients, and I'm tired at the end, but I'm quite happy. I love my own space, but I know that I have to socialize more. I have to meet people more. I have to sleep better. These are things that, you have to sometimes do it like a medicine.
Yeah. They are lifestyle medicine.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I'd like to actually talk about the food for a moment before I let you go, because I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of OBGYN will say, well, you're getting into the perimenopause and menopausal stage, you start becoming more insulin resistant. So the solution is to cut out the carbs and stay on a almost carnivore diet, very
correct.
low, keto diet. And I personally feel that that's really deterrent to our health overall. And there are many ways to manage, especially someone like me who's actually reverse type 2 diabetes with
Totally.
food only. I've done it on a plant-based diet, lots of carbs, mostly carbs. And I like to actually clarify that point with you, if you don't mind.
So that is really hurtful and sad information, because we know that you'll actually get more insulin resistant the more animal foods that you eat, whether it's white meat, but especially with red meat and processed meat.
Mm.
And we know that from all the studies. So really what you should be doing is looking at your diet, and it should be roughly about 55% carbohydrates. That's what the WHO also says. You want to be focusing on protein, but it shouldn't be coming from animals. It should be plant protein. You should be having about 1.5, 1.6
Grams.
grams per kilogram body weight, and you should actually work that out. And it may be that you can do that all through your diet, or you might have to add a scoop or two of, a plant protein powder with some creatine, especially if and you should be strength training, whatever your age, you should be doing it twice a week. So, and if you're very small built and petite, you should try and have some wrist weights and ankle weights and a vest, and do some, either body Pilates, body resistance exercises or actual weights. But you do need to do strength training, and it's important because a lot of our lives are sedentary. So when you are advocating for somebody to go on a keto diet, avoid fruit, avoid carbohydrates, you're actually doing, as a health professional, a great disservice, because more women die of heart attacks than men. And so you do not want to increase your cardiac risk. You really want to be flooding your body with color. So as I said, your diet should be about 10 to 13 portions of fruits and vegetables, which means a portion is what you can catch in a handful. So you want to be having a large salad, 4 or 5 different types of fruits, a handful of nuts and seeds. You want to be having, for example, a big soup, or you could with lots of vegetables in it, baked potatoes with the salad and hummus. You can have loads. I have so many recipes on my website, tofu scramble and different
Me
dishes.
hungry.
Yes, and lasagnas and all these things. But there are so many things one can do. It's not a diet of deprivation, it's a diet that is filled with joy. And so it's not just, I always say, it's not what you are actually giving up, it's what you're embracing. So instead of thinking I'm cutting out something, just crowd them out. So instead of thinking I'm going to give up the meat, or I'm going to give up the donut, don't think of that. Think I'm going to have a half a pot of soy yogurt, about 200 grams of soy yogurt with a chopped up couple of dates and some pecans, some goji berries. And then if I still want to have the donut, I will think about it, but it would be a treat. And, learning how to eat early in the day, learning to front load your calories, trying to remember to drink water. These are all things, and being mindful when you eat, trying to eat before 7 o'clock in the evening. These are all little things, but trying to cut out carbohydrates is such a sad advice that is not sustainable. People can't do it, and they end up putting on all the weight back. And actually, yes, you can lose weight in any which way. You can starve yourself, right? And you can lose weight. You can do a keto diet. You can do a high fat diet. You can do a plant-based diet. You can lose weight. But keeping it off is important, and keeping it off healthily is important. So that's what I would say to those
Amazing.
people.
What's your thought about intermittent fasting?
I think intermittent fasting has to be taken a little bit carefully with people who are having hormonal health changes. So I would say intermittent fasting for 14 hours is absolutely fine, up to 16. You want to eat at 7 o'clock and then maybe eat by 8, 9 o'clock. You don't want to do fasted exercise. Really, most women will benefit from having something to eat before they go and do their strength training or their exercise, rather than like men, where there may be some benefits. I talk about that in the book as well. And so you can do it. I personally fast, and I do enjoy fasting 24 hours of the day, once a week. But I'm not a great fan of the 5-2, where you can eat what you want and then you starve yourself. Also, I'm not sure that fasting after, like, missing breakfast is a great way of doing intermittent fasting. I think doing the intermittent fasting the other way makes much more sense, where you're finishing eating by say 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and then, having things like chamomile tea and all that, and then having a good breakfast in the morning. So breakfast and lunch and things should be, ideally trying to eat in that 8 to 10 hours, but eating foods that really fill you up and that you enjoy. And actually, once you start eating these foods, yes, occasionally you might crave that slice of chocolate cake, but when you eat more than that, you will find that having a couple of bites is actually usually more than enough.
Yeah, definitely changes your relationship with food,
Yes,
your addictions,
absolutely.
if you have any.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, following more of a circadian rhythm when it comes to how we eat. And also, you made a point, is what you eat when you're eating, not so
Correct.
much eat whatever you want and then don't eat, because
And
that
also, I
doesn't
don't
change.
like labeling foods good and bad,
Yeah.
because I do enjoy, treat foods, and they're treats, but just don't eat them all the time, because then it's not going to help you.
Yeah.
They're going to feel rubbish. So,
Yeah. Amazing. Oh my
Thank
God.
you,
Thank you
Sandra.
so much. I mean,
You're
first of
welcome.
all, you look amazing. So if
Okay,
anything,
thank
looking at
you.
you, it's an inspiration.
Just recovered from COVID, so if you're saying I'm
Oh,
looking
well,
okay, that's fine.
you're looking great. Well done. It's because you're healthy. And I really want to thank you for all the work that you do, for sharing, for impacting so many lives with knowledge. I think having experience that you have the practice that you have and having really acknowledged the limitation of some of the trainings that are more classical to then adding on more lifestyle. It's empowering for doctors and for patients alike. So thank you so much. And thank you for being on the
Thank you so
podcast.
much.
Anytime.
Namaste.
Bye. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bajekal, for being on the show, for sharing your wisdom and your journey. I am so impressed. And guys, I hope you enjoyed it too, because this is one of those really powerful episodes where you can learn a lot and take control of your health. If you haven't already read the book, Finding Me in Menopause, go into the show notes, grab yourself a copy. And of course, as always, if you give us feedback, rate us, and share us, we can keep on growing and inviting more and more amazing people on the show. And I really can't wait to talk to you next week. Bye.